Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. We are told that attacks on Russian oil are clean, precise, and moral. In reality, drones are now hitting tankers in Turkey's own economic zone and blowing up offshore loading terminals that feed Western companies and Kazakhstan's budget. This is the part no politician wants to explain on TV. Two tankers first, both foreign flagged, both heading empty towards Novorossiysk to load crude. One of them, the Kairos, under a Gambian flag, takes an explosion in the engine room about 20 nautical miles off the Turkish coast. Fire, mayday, evacuation of 25 crew. The second, the Verat, is hit twice in the Black Sea and has to be towed towards Turkey. Officially, this is sold as striking a shadow fleet. In practice, it is setting civilian steel on fire in Turkey's exclusive economic zone. Now, here's the part that keeps economists and sailors awake at night. An empty tanker is never empty. There are residual volumes in the tanks, vapors, slops. Even EU sanctions quietly admit this by carving out exceptions for residual Russian oil. Everyone who has ever seen a bunker tank knows this. So when you launch weapons at tankers near crowded sea lanes, you are not just targeting Moscow. You are rolling dice on a pollution incident that will not stop at any flag or language. Turkey, to its credit, at least pretends to understand the problem. Its foreign ministry talks about risks to shipping safety, human life, and the environment in its own economic zone, and about stakeholders it is consulting to prevent escalation. You see the problem here, right? Those stakeholders are not just Russia and Ukraine. They include insurers in London, refiners in Europe, ship owners everywhere, and any coastal state whose fisheries and tourism die if something leaks and burns in the wrong place. This is where the story stops making sense. On one side, we have tactical PR about successful operations against some abstract shadow fleet. On the other, we have very concrete people, multinational crews who have nothing to do with Kremlin strategy, and coastal states that will pay for any spill with real money and real jobs. In short, the math of risk does not care about the moral packaging. Now, move from tankers to pipes and moorings. The same week, unmanned boats hit the marine terminal of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium near Novorossiysk. One of the single-point moorings, SPM-2, is significantly damaged. The harbor master suspends loading, tankers are towed clear. Emergency systems cut the flow in time, so there is no initial spill. From an engineering point of view, the protection worked impressively well. From a systemic point of view, someone just kicked one of the main export arteries of Central Asian oil. There is one number in this whole story that nobody in Brussels likes to say out loud. We'll get to it. CPC is not a Russian pipeline, in the propaganda sense. It is a joint piece of infrastructure. Russia is there through Transneft. Kazakhstan is there through its state company. Western majors are there, Chevron, Eni, and others. The crude moving through this pipe does not belong to a single flag. It is a mix of interests, contracts, and budget lines. According to the figures cited by Kazakh experts, roughly 1.2 million barrels per day are pumped through CPC in normal operation. More than 1 million of those barrels are Kazakh. So over 80% of the flow that now gets disrupted by SPM-2 being offline is not Russian at all. Short candidate. The inoperative mooring is estimated to cost Kazakhstan around $4 million per day in lost revenue and taxes. That is the quiet part, said out loud. The hit on Russia is structurally a hit on Kazakhstan's budget and on Western companies' upstream projects. So, let's take a breath. Where does this leave us so far? Under the slogan of punishing Russia, we have attacks on tankers in Turkey's zone and on a pipeline system where more than 4 out of 5 barrels belong to Kazakhstan, with American and European companies in the shareholder list. And this brings us to the one question that changes the entire equation. Why would anyone rational want to normalize this as a tool of policy? Now we move to logistics, the boring part that actually decides everything. If CPC is constrained, in theory, Kazakhstan can reroute flows. In reality, each alternative is full of hard limits. Some volumes can go through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan system, but that line is optimized for Azerbaijani light crude. Mixing different grades is not a clerical issue. It is a refinery and contract problem. It means batch scheduling, separate time slots, coordination with Azerbaijan, and someone voluntarily pumping less of their own oil so that you can pump more of yours. Try selling that to Baku. Exports to China go via another pipeline that already carries Russian crude, about 10 million tons a year, with requests on the table for more. Capacity is not infinite. Compressors do not appear by magic, and transit deals are political negotiations, not Uber rides. As for sending more barrels to Europe by rerouting towards Germany through Russian territory, that requires political will in Berlin, a green light from Moscow, available capacity at Transneft, and a tolerance for being openly dependent on the same infrastructure you are sanctioning in speeches. In short, the plumbing is not ready for heroics. Every alternative route sounds simple in press releases and becomes ugly once you draw it on a map with actual capacities and contracts. If you're watching this from any energy importing country, ask yourself, does this look like a strategy or just managed chaos? We are normalizing weapons against infrastructure that underpins global supply in the middle of an inflation cycle that already crushed household energy budgets in 2022 to 2023. This is the structural flaw you can't fix with a press release. Now, look at the players and incentives. Ukraine has a clear short-term motive. Anything that raises the cost of Russian-linked export infrastructure is framed as a victory. Russia has its own logic. It wants to keep Caspian flows running because it earns transit fees, keeps leverage over Kazakhstan, and avoids spooking Asian buyers. Kazakhstan suddenly finds itself paying roughly $4 million per day for an attack it did not order, on infrastructure it partly owns, delivering oil that has nothing to do with Donbass. And then we have the Western majors and European consumers. Official rhetoric in Brussels is about reducing dependence on Russian energy and building a clean, secure system. In practice, some of that non-Russian oil arrives through Russian ports and pipelines on tankers that get labeled shadow fleet the moment it becomes convenient. Here is where the story stops making sense. The same system that claims to defend energy security silently relies on the very infrastructure it tolerates being attacked. So where does this hit people, not just logos? Start with Kazakhstan. $4 million per day is money not going into its budget, its investment programs, its social spending. Move to shipping. Crews who signed contracts to move oil, not to participate in someone's hybrid war, now have to factor in fires, evacuations, and higher war risk insurance. If you work in maritime transport, you have seen this movie before. You know how it ends. Higher premiums, fewer willing carriers, higher delivered prices. Then Europe. Every time a pipeline, terminal, or tanker is taken out, even temporarily, the signal to the market is simple. More risk, more volatility. That means higher option premiums, wider spreads, and eventually another excuse for retail prices to be adjusted upwards. This is the moment when geopolitical theater turns into a new line on your fuel receipt or your electricity bill. And while this is happening, one EU leader is doing something extremely impolite. Viktor Orban flies to Moscow twice in a year and says directly, Hungary's energy security, past, present, and future, is based on stable Russian supplies. He brags that Hungary has the lowest household energy prices in Europe because it buys cheap Russian oil and gas compared to international benchmarks. Now, here is the part that keeps Brussels awake at night. Whatever you think of Orban politically, his households see the bill, not the communiques. If you're watching this from Germany, the Baltics, or the UK, your reality is very different. You are told that paying more is a moral duty, that attacking Russian energy infrastructure is security, and that everything will be fine once the green transition accelerates. At the same time, landlocked Kazakhstan is punished for someone else's war, tankers burn near Turkey, and one EU member quietly locks in discounted Russian flows to keep its voters calm. So, the convenient lie is simple, that you can weaponize energy infrastructure and sea lanes surgically, harming only the designated enemy. The reality is that the system is tightly coupled. Pipes, ports, and tankers do not carry flags. They carry molecules and cash flows that tie Russia, Kazakhstan, Western majors, Turkey, and EU consumers into one nervous network. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Every time we normalize an attack on their infrastructure, we normalize attacks on our own resilience. Energy systems don't care about propaganda. They care about capacity, redundancy, and risk. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids. Systems do.